So, good afternoon to you all. First of all, welcome to Lisbon, to those that have arrived to Lisbon for the conference and for this session today. It's a pleasure to receive you here and to welcome you to our offices. We are doing this in collaboration with the Belgian Chamber, and today we have a session that is going to take us through several important topics around the ocean and blue economy and the new frontiers. Now, I would like to start with this, so the new frontiers. Challenges that we have today on the new frontiers are both on the oceans, on the blue economy, but also on biodiversity and on space. We have the new challenges around space. So blue, green, and space, I believe that are today the largest challenges that we have as a society, as communities, to get new resources, to develop new economies, and to further strive the progress of our communities. On the sustainability side, and I would like to focus that, the ocean plays a fundamental role for sustainability, both not only on the environmental side, of course, but also on the resilience of economies. And a country like Portugal has to have a privilege and has to use the privilege of having the ocean and the fact that we have one of the largest, as we were speaking with the minister, the fact that we have one of the largest areas, ocean areas in the globe. We need to use this. And we need to use this for, when we speak about blue economy has to do with connectivity. It has to do with energy generation, has to do with water resources for our countries. So, for instance, now in Portugal, we are facing some level of drought, and the capacity of using the ocean as a solution for this type of issues, like a drought that we have mostly in the south of the country, are fundamental. And if you look, Portugal does not have any desalination so far. So probably this is some type of issue that we need to address, is should we have desalination as a solution for droughts in Portugal to make sure that we have appropriate water supply. We have other challenges on the energy side. So there's coming up an option of power generation from wind offshore. That's a way to use economy. And the fact that we create power offshore generation creates an ecosystem around that economy that generates additional economy, generates additional synergies, additional possibilities to develop other economic exploitation of the ocean. If we look to connectivity and in a digital transition era that we are today, it's fundamental that we have the appropriate connectivity, data connectivity between the different countries, between the different areas, for instance, of the Atlantic. We have connectivity with Brazil, we have connectivity with Africa, we miss connectivity with the US. So we need to take profit of this also to make part of this ecosystem around the ocean. So I think that for today, the challenge will be around how can we make the ocean an area of development of economy, of development of new solutions, technology. We were speaking about, there's a lot of technology around the ocean. We have great universities in Portugal that have been studying, developing, preparing resources, developing pilots around the ocean. We have ROVs, we have automated ROVs that go to the bottom of the ocean, 5,000 kilometers. They were developed by an engineering center in Portugal, in the north of the country, that has been developing this for the last 10 years. So probably what we need is to bring things together, is to bring the efforts and combine efforts with investment, and that will help to progress substantially on this blue economy. So without further ado, I'm gonna pass to Rui to present the first panel that we have. And thank you very much for attending this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Rui de Oliveira Neves, and thank you to Moraes Leitão for hosting this event and for your kind support. Dear Mr. Vincent van Quickenborne, Minister of Justice and the North Sea of Belgium, dear Mr. José Maria Costa, a good friend of our chamber, Secretary of State for Maritime Affairs of Portugal, dear Mrs. Isabel Estrada Carvalhais, member of the European Parliament, dear Mr. Felix Leinemann, Head of Unit, Blue Economy Sectors, Aquaculture and Maritime Spatial Planning at DG Mare, European Commission, dear Mr. Jan Verbeek, Consul General of Belgium in Portugal, dear moderators, dear speakers, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to the 4th edition of the Belgian-Portuguese Routes for the Blue Economy. I'm Rui Faria da Cunha, and I have the pleasure of being the president of the Belgian-Portuguese Chamber of Commerce since 2019. Our chamber was created in 1938, so it's one of the oldest bilateral chambers of commerce in Belgium, by 5 Belgian and Portuguese businessmen, and we have tried to play an important role since then in promoting trade, investment, and friendship ties between the two countries. In 2019, just after we turned 81 years old, our board, under the leadership of Vice Presidents Frederico Cardigos, yes, and Pete Harens, yes. So here present, and the support of several important companies and institutions in both countries, we have decided to launch an yearly event to bring together Belgian, Portuguese, and European companies and institutions active in the blue economy realm. The main objectives of this event are to raise awareness and promote discussions on topics related to the blue economy, to stimulate contacts and foster the sharing of experiences and know-how between stakeholders in this field, and to create opportunities between companies and policymakers with responsibilities in this area, both at national governments and at European level. In the first 3 editions, we have addressed topics such as offshore wind energy, marine biodiversity, smart infrastructure, and monitoring of the marine and ocean environment. And in today's event, we will focus on pilot tests and living labs. We are honored to have been selected as an official side event of the UN Ocean Conference. That's why we are today here in Lisbon. And before leaving the floor to the specialists, I would like to throw a few thank you notes. First, I would like to thank our co-organizers, AEDES, Fórum Oceano and Siena, and our supporters, Blue Cluster and Moraes Leitão. I would like also to thank the moderators and the speakers of today's event for accepting our invitation to share your views and showcase your unique experiences. Thank you also to the participants for being here, both in person and remotely, because this is an hybrid session, so many are actually assisting remotely. Thank you also to our Chamber's enthusiastic Blue Economy Task Force, Pete Harens, Frederico Cardigos, Pierre Poncelet, Inês Giesteira, and Helena Alexandre. You did a great job, and I look forward to continue working with you in the next projects. I wish you all a great event and look forward to seeing you all again in next year's event in Belgium. You're welcome to come to Belgium. If you want to know more about our chamber and next events, please check our webpage and follow us in social media. If you want, you can also further support us by joining our chamber. So it's now time to work. I will now give the floor to the first speaker in the first panel, in the opening session. That is Mr. Felix Leinemann, as I told you just a while ago, Head of Unit, Blue Economy Sectors, Aquaculture and Maritime Special Planning at DG Mare, European Commission. Mr. Leinemann, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm very honored to be the one introducing the illustrious panel that we have here. I was asked when I was approached by Federico to speak about the role of pilot projects in the blue economy according to the European Commission. And I wondered, so what am I going to tell you? It is a somewhat unusual question because we never asked ourselves what is the role of pilot projects. We saw them as a natural part of our approach to a sustainable blue economy because it's a lot of pioneering, it's a lot of piloting, it's a lot of going forward. But in fact, we have been pushing a lot for pilot projects over recent years as our policy has evolved. The policy goes back to an integrated maritime policy in 2007, to a blue growth strategy in 2012. But just over a year ago, the European Commission adopted its new approach for a sustainable blue economy, where it outlined all the transformations that will be needed across maritime value chains as a whole. And the blue economy makes no exception when it comes to the European Green Deal and achieving its objectives, becoming the first carbon neutral continent in 2050 at the latest, and addressing the biodiversity crisis while leaving no one behind. And the ocean plays an important role here. All sectors will need to undergo a transformation. And our new approach to the sustainable blue economy distinguishes 4 strands that are very much interlinked: decarbonization, biodiversity and coastal resilience, responsible food systems, and circularity. And if I look at today's agenda, there's no coincidence that a lot of that actually overlaps, and because those are the areas where we will need to work. I would like to highlight a few examples of these sectors. Decarbonization of energy production. Where was the first speaker? Sorry. When you gave the introduction, you said the auctions are going to come. The offshore renewables energy strategy that the European Commission adopted 1.5 years ago, in November 2020, set an ambition of having at least 60 gigawatt of offshore renewable energy from the wind, the waves, and the tides by 2030 in EU waters. Now we are only 1.5 years later, but with what has happened over the past 1.5 years, everything has accelerated. And the pledges that we have from member states, and not least from Belgium and from Portugal in this regard, if we calculate all the pledges that we have there, we are already arriving at 90 gigawatt by 2030. And that has happened in only 1.5 years. So we are going to see a massive acceleration of things to come. We also need to look at decarbonization of shipping and ports. I'm waiting to see similar accelerations there. That is, of course, also something that is regulated at international level, but the EU, for its part, is pushing for the IMO and others to come. Biodiversity loss is a key threat for humanity. Almost half of global gross domestic product is linked to nature. We don't always realize that, of course. But restoring biodiversity will be part of the recovery. And the EU biodiversity sets an ambition of having 30% of marine protected areas in our waters by 2030, 1/3 of which strictly protected. But we also last week proposed a nature restoration law where we want to put member states to put in place effective and area-based restoration measures which should cover at least 20% of the Union's lands and seas by 2030. Nature-based solutions can help us to adapt to climate change and also to protect ourselves against sea level rise. I'm looking forward to seeing a few examples in this afternoon. Another area, responsible food systems. We will continue to make the management of fisheries more sustainable, and we are working on developing alternative sources of food and feed from the sea. Blue foods. And this afternoon at the UN Ocean Conference, there was a side event on highlighting the role of blue foods. They can help alleviate pressure on climate and on natural resources, as they use much less resources than whatever is farmed on land. Last year, the Commission adopted new strategic guidelines for aquaculture, and before the end of this year, we are going to present a dedicated EU algae initiative, looking at seaweed and microalgae. And again, I'm looking forward to seeing a couple of examples today. Now, the sea and the ocean can bring many solutions, but even if it looks large and wide, especially flying into Lisbon this morning, it is already quite crowded. Belgians can tell you a story about that. It looks more crowded when you're at the Belgian coast, but it's something. So whenever you use it, it also needs protection. And maritime space needs to be used and planned well. And that leads me to the question of multi-use. Do you use the space for just one economic objective, or do you combine different uses at the same time? It is possible. Offshore wind farms and food production, nature restoration, etc. Over the years, the European Commission has supported multiple pilot projects in the blue economy. We have set up a network of Blue Invest and a Blue Invest assistance mechanism that helps companies to tap into private investment. We have published a number of calls and finance projects under the so-called blue economy window calls. And we have seen quite a lot of research and innovation. For example, the Horizon 2020 projects, Muses United, with several pilots, one of which in Belgium, or Musica, which looks at solutions for islands, are an example of that. Back to the question, pilot projects and their role, I thought of a quote that has marked me quite a lot. And I was reminded of an inspiring pioneer and an actual pilot, Bertrand Piccard. It's a Swiss entrepreneur who was the first to fly around the world in Solar Impulse in 2016, a plane that was purely working on solar, not a Belgian, no, and not a Portuguese, no. So when he was interviewed and he was talking about Solar Impulse, he said that when I was flying over the Pacific and the Atlantic, I thought I was in the future. I was looking at the sun that was running my 4 electric motors with huge propellers. There was no sound, no noise, no pollution, no fuel, and I could fly forever. But then he explained that even though the experience seemed futuristic, he realized that this is not the future. On the contrary, it is the pure present. It is possible to do it now because this is exactly the kind of opportunities that today's technologies offer. And that's where we come to the importance of pilot projects. This is when I understood that the rest of the world is in the past, in old, polluting, and inefficient systems, said Bertrand Piccard. So that's what I hope pilot projects are all about, freeing us from the past and allowing us to save the ocean and our planet. And with that, I look forward to the presentations today and wish us a fruitful conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weineman. Now I will give the floor to Isabel Estrada Carvalhais, member of the European Parliament, please.
Thank you so much. To begin with, let me please greet all the distinguished members of this panel, as well as the distinguished members of these assistants here. Thank you so much, first of all, to the Belgian-Portuguese Chamber of Commerce for this kind invitation and for giving me the opportunity to address a few words about the very recent European Parliament's report on towards a sustainable blue economy in the EU, the role of fisheries and aquaculture sectors. I was actually the rapporteur of the European Parliament for this report that I was very keen and very proud of doing, and I hope it will have some sort of political result in the future as a message. Unfortunately, it is now becoming common sense to understand that the oceans are fundamental for life and for its continuity on Earth, which indicates a growing public awareness of how important it is, marine environment, and simultaneously of its enormous fragility. Home to millions of species, counting for nearly 80% of all life forms, the oceans cover 70% of Earth's surface. They are the true lungs of the planet, generating 50% of the oxygen surrounding us. They are also the largest deposits of carbon, absorbing 25% of all carbon dioxide emissions and capturing 90% of the heat generated by these emissions. Despite its importance, and I'm sure this is all very obvious for us here, and in all its grandeur and beauty, and despite the growing awareness already mentioned here about its incalculable value, our effective understanding of the oceans is still rather limited. The oceans are largely a kind of last frontier within the planet itself that we have not been able to explore fully yet. Aware of this reality, we know that United Nations, for instance, has declared the 2021-2030 as the decade of the ocean science for sustainable development. As we know, the conservation and sustainable use of marine biodiversity is critical to the health of the oceans. In the European context, and sensitive to this fact, the common fisheries policy is broadly in line with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal number 14, calling for a coordinated strategic EU approach to support a balanced growth of fisheries and aquaculture, having in mind the environmental as well as the economic and social sustainability of these sectors. However, it is urgent to go much further. While both fisheries and aquaculture are essential to provide Europe with healthy foods of highly nutritional value and with a low carbon footprint, they also have to be able to deepen their work towards greater environmental sustainability. In this context, the European Commission presented, as we know, a communication on a new approach for a sustainable blue economy in the EU, aiming at making our blue economy more efficient and competitive while phasing out carbon emissions, protecting the environment and biodiversity, and leaving no one behind. Of course, while I see the relevance of the Commission's communication and its contribution to replace the idea of unregulated blue growth with the idea of a sustainable blue economy, I regret, though, the absence of specific targets for the future different blue sectors, in particular for fisheries and aquaculture. Another message I find relevant to stress relates to the comprehensiveness of blue economy. This broad segment of our economy covers all industries and sectors related to the oceans, seas, coasts, and even land-based aquaculture and algae production. Behind the comprehensive reality, or being a comprehensive reality, the sectors have often opposing goals and visions, and this becomes particularly worrying in the absence of a strategic maritime special planning, causing damage, especially to more fragile sectors, such as small-scale fisheries, which are indeed very relevant, as we know, in a country like Portugal, where about 85 to 90% is small-scale fishery. The EU and the member states must, of course, seriously address this lack of a strategic maritime spatial planning, as it represents an added socioeconomic stress put on the shoulders of fishers. A sustainable blue economy must embrace a balanced development between relevant emerging activities, such as blue biotechnology, ocean-based energy production, and more traditional activities such as maritime transport, tourism, fisheries, and aquaculture. It is therefore necessary to create a forum for dialogue at the EU level capable of striving for a balance of power between multiple stakeholders, fostering cooperation and sharing conflict-solving experiences. We must also look attentively to science and innovation, as both are outstanding gateways of opportunities for better and deeper understanding of the oceans. And only with solid scientific knowledge can we make decisions and public policies oriented towards the correct conservation and use of maritime resources. Taking fisheries as an example, there is no way its long-term competitiveness and economic performance can happen without taking environmental sustainability very seriously And this equation will require the precious help of science and innovation. This implies stronger and broader cooperation between universities, labs, public authorities and industry in order to promote the best possible measures and design of public policies based on the best available scientific knowledge that may be capable of improving efficiency and safety at work, keeping competitiveness while guaranteeing environmental sustainability. I would like to say a word because I know we are short on time, so I don't want to take much of your time, but let me just say a word on the relevance of the marine protected areas. This report has several aspects also related to the relevance, for instance, of women in the fisheries and aquaculture sector. This is important because usually they are not recognized as relevant stakeholders. They are about 12% of official, of legal declared work, but they are so much more engaged in these activities. But this is another issue. But let me give a word on the relevance of marine protected areas. I was really astonished at the European Parliament because we still have such a long way to make everyone aware of the relevance of marine protected areas. I believe that effective marine protected areas can be extremely beneficial for fisheries and for the sustainability of fisheries resources. That is why we need to invest more, again with the precious help of science, on the creation of real MPAs, beyond legal papers, real MPAs that can actually guarantee the sustainability of resources in the long term, as well as the economic sustainability of all fishers, and not just a few large-scale ones. And this was tremendously important in our fight in the European Parliament, and we saw, I should say, the strength of the lobby of those who are still in need of understanding the true value of marine protected areas. So, ladies and gentlemen, the health of the oceans and their direct relationship with our own survival imposes the need to rethink our activities and the way in which they influence this vital space. Acting now in defense of the oceans is an ethical and a moral imperative to which we must all respond as best as we can in our different roles. For instance, today I'm here with my son, who's only 14, and I think of him and I think of my grandchildren one day, and we all think of our children and grandchildren, and we want them to give them a better future. And ocean is life, as we all know here. Ocean is the basis of our own survival in the future. That's why I find it always so important that we bring this kind of message and take it everywhere we go. So thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Isabel Estrada Carvalhais. Now I would ask the Secretary of State for Maritime Affairs of Portugal, José Maria Costa, to please take the floor.
Muito boa tarde a todos. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here with the Chamber of Commerce. We have, in my other life, a good cooperation. I have good friends here, Frederico and Pete. Dear Minister of the North Sea of Belgium, dear representatives from the European Parliament and Commission, Isabel Carvalhais and Felix Lindman, dear President of the Belgian-Portuguese Chamber of Commerce, and Dr. Rui Neves from the host of this session. The first thing I would like to say is congratulate your very good work to promote the commerce and in connection between Portugal and Belgium. And I hope after the meeting today, this morning with the minister, my minister, we can grow these relationships and to promote more investment together in the oceans issues. The second is my Prime Minister today make a statement in the United Nations conference with very important things. Dr. Isabel Carvalhais is referring in his speech something. The first is we are improve to 2030, 10 gigawatts in renewable energies in the ocean. It's a very important target. It's involving all the partners and all the industries, but all the technology and the research centers. The second is we are the commitment to put 30% of protected areas in the sea. It's very important for keeping the reserves, but also to develop and to invest in the knowledge. And the knowledge also in the seabed is very important, this knowledge. And the third is the shipping. We are increasing a pilot zone without pollution from the shippings. We are very involved in to promote the shipping and the green shipping in our country. But I think it's a privilege to be here with a member of the Commission and to put some message. I think after this conference, we need to empower more the maritime policies in Europe and to put in the center of the agenda of Europe all the things, the biodiversity, the knowledge, the shipping, but also I think the ocean is the new territory of Europe. And we need to talk together and to improve more studies, more knowledge, but new energy to the center of the discussion inside Europe. Not only the maritime countries, but all the European Union. It's very important. The ocean is part of all the countries of the European Union. This is my message, excuse me, but it's very important at this moment, and it's very important to be here, members of the Parliament, the European Parliament, because we need to discuss in the future new approach about the maritime policy. And I think another thing very important is the cooperation between the research centers because we need to put an alliance, all the countries, about the study, invest more knowledge, because the economy, the blue sustainable economy is the economy of the knowledge. This is very important, the cooperation between the different research centers. But I have my speech, now I'm going to the speech. It's a great honor to me as a Secretary of State of Maritime Affairs of the Portuguese government, but also as a Portuguese citizen, to count on your enthusiasm and interest in being part of the second United Nations Ocean Conference. This event is part of this major conference that will shape the future of the ocean in coming years, and we are confident that your presence and participation will further contribute to increasing knowledge, to better informed decision-making and action. Firstly, I would like to greet the Belgian-Portuguese Chamber of Commerce for organizing this side event of the UN Ocean Conference dedicated to the Belgian-Portuguese routes for the blue economy. I'm sure that all the participants will have a very fruitful afternoon debating such important matters as energy and transportation, solutions for coastal eco-restoration and biotechnology, bioproduction as a part of the strategy to enhance the blue economy. Portugal and Belgium share a strong commitment towards the protection of the oceans, and the vision that this goal is perfectly compatible with the development of the blue economy is not doubt the win-win situation, boosting the economy while protecting the ocean. Despite the mediatic attention generated around issues concerning climate change, plastic pollution, and illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, the health of our ocean continues declining. It's up to each and every one of us to revert that situation throughout a strong commitment of all nations on the protection of the oceans. Portugal has recently approved the National Maritime Strategy for 2030, based on the importance of the scientific knowledge for the ocean protection, the enhancement of marine ecosystem service, and the recognition of the role as the vectors of a sustainable development and at the same time from the strength of the traditional and emerging sectors of the blue economy. Our strategy includes target actions aimed at retaining and attracting talent and investment to enhance our science internationally, promoting collaborative environments with potential for innovation. For this purpose, Portugal has leveraged many financial instruments dedicated to the enhancement of scientific knowledge, ocean research capacity development, and promotion of marine technology transfer. These funds are the Blue Growth EU grants, the Blue Fund, and Portugal Blue, and the Portuguese Recovery and Resilience Plan with development of the Blue Hub, an infrastructure network from the blue economy. In this spirit, Portugal will continue to support ocean researchers, investors, and entrepreneurs in any way possible, either through faster and more efficient financing mechanisms or through wider availability of opportunities to showcase existing knowledge and technology that can simultaneously protect and economically valorize the ocean. Portugal is hopeful that all nations of the world have come to a UN Ocean Conference with strong ambition and commitments to take the action to revert the decline of the ocean health. The government of Portugal and Kenya, together with the United Nations, have worked incessantly on the organization of this great event and are hopeful that you take each and every opportunity to enhance your knowledge, expertise, and business network to benefit the ocean health and the sustainable blue economy. Thanks, and let's make the ocean health again. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary of State for Maritime Affairs of Portugal, José Maria Costa. Now, the last speaker of this opening session is the Minister for the Justice and the North Sea of Belgium, Mr. Vincent van Quickenborne, and please, the floor is yours. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, President. Thank you, dear colleague from the Portuguese government, member of European Parliament, director of the DG Mare. What a beautiful word, DG Mare. Beautiful. Thank you for having me here, and for the first time physically, because I had 2 sessions with you through Zoom, I think, I presume. It's very nice to be here, especially to express the fact that Belgium and Portugal have a lot of things in common. I mean, we are both coastal countries. We have a coastal tradition. We have almost the same size, bigger, smaller, size and population. We are experts in good food and soccer. But for most, I think we are small countries in Europe, but very ambitious when it comes to the blue economy and the protection of the climate. That's what I see. And the reason I'm here today is twofold. Of course, attending the UN Ocean Conference, where I was this morning, and of course the most important thing is to be here. At the UN conference, my message was very clear, and I addressed myself to the honourable member of European Parliament. Belgium was the first country to have a maritime spatial planning. In 2014, we were the first country to do that in the world, and now we're at the midst of our second maritime spatial plan and already preparing the third one. And we are promoting Europe to do the same for the whole of Europe, which you are doing, and I'm very grateful for that. I was at the UN conference, also Ocean Conference, to say that 2022, and I addressed myself to economic audience, but it is important for us to conclude 2 important treaties this year. It's what they call the High Seas Treaty. It's the beyond national jurisdiction, so that we worldwide, we can define marine protected areas, which we do not know at this moment for the high seas. And that is an important discussion that will take place in August in this year in New York. And then you have the Convention on Biodiversity, which takes place in Nairobi, the moment as we speak, and will hopefully wrap up in Montreal at the end of the year. And that is important because then we can define, thanks to that convention, the real protection. Real protection, that's what the different speakers already said, 30 by 30, yeah, that's what's here on the pin. 30% of all oceans protected by 2030. 30 by 30. And as the honorable member of the European Parliament said, true protection, not paper protection, because you can say, okay, we have 30% protected, but those parts want to be highly and fully protected, like we call it. That's the whole discussion. And that's the reason why Portugal and Belgium are together in the Blue Alliance, the Blue Leaders Alliance. What we started in 2019, only 3 years ago, just before COVID. And today we have about 30 countries joining us to promote that strategy. And I was pretty optimistic when I heard this morning, colleagues from Portugal, Nigeria, countries like Uruguay joining, Dominican Republic, even the Dutch people are joining us. And hopefully Bahrain, United Emirates. I mean, all those countries are coming together to promote that. So that's the first reason I'm here today. But of course, I'm here today at the chamber, and I would like to salute you, because when I just met the State Secretary, I was talking to him and saying to him, you know, Belgium is maybe at the heart of Europe. We're so proud about that, Brussels. But we only have 67 kilometers of shoreline. I asked the State Secretary, how long is our shoreline? He said 25 kilometers. He was joking at me. It's 67 kilometers. But you know, 67 kilometers. In total, the shoreline worldwide, you know how long is that? Maybe I can ask to the future member of European Parliament. In kilometers, how many, if you count all shorelines worldwide? Worldwide.
Or only European?
No, worldwide.
Worldwide.
So we have 67. What would it be in the whole of, if you take all countries, China, America, South America?
Would be, of course, thousands.
Exactly. 600,000. So that means that Belgium is only 0.01% of that. And so you should say, okay, Belgium is just a drop in the ocean. And yet, we are the country that has, in terms of port activity, we have the second largest port in Europe. That's the port of Antwerp-Bruges. It's now the new name of the port. We are, and yet we are a country that has a protected area in Belgian North Sea of 37%. So we are already beyond the 30%. 30% of our marine territorial waters, the economic zone is already 37%. And yet we have the sixth largest capacity when it comes to offshore windmills today in Belgium. So even a small country can mean a lot in what is happening. And we will triple our offshore capacity by 2030 to 6 gigawatts, and by 2040 to 8 gigawatts. So you talked about 90 gigawatts, so 8 out of 90. So we're doing our fair share, although we have only 67 kilometers in shoreline. But we want to do more. As a minister of the North Sea and the oceans, let's innovate. We want to be the first country in the world where you have floating solar panels on the sea. And we want to place them right between the windmills to add another gigawatt on the sea. We want to innovate. We are cultivating mussels now and oysters. But we're looking also at seaweed and algae, because today the seaweed has been the fastest growing food product in the world. It's in everything, in yogurt, in yam, in soup. And we're talking about cultivation of seaweed as a raw material for the development of biofuels. That is important because in sectors where electrification is slower, such as heavy road transport, fisheries, recreational boating, I mean, unlike hydrogen, it doesn't require a new engine. So therefore, seaweed is important. And we're working together with our Dutch colleagues from the Eindhoven University and TNO Delft. They have shown that there's great potential for example, ethanol as a fuel derived from seaweed. So that's also very interesting. Okay, our ambition is that the North Sea becomes the powerhouse of our energy independence. And of course, energy independence as you know, is relevant in the light of all what is happening in the world. The second thing I would like to add is that what we want to do as a government is to install progressive new regulation so that, the companies create new products and new markets. And that's what we've done with autonomous vessels. Last year when I was talking to you, it was a promise. There was an announcement, but since July of last year, July 2021, the Belgian North Sea, the complete Belgian North Sea, is one of the largest testing grounds where private companies can experiment with these technologies. We are one of the first places in the world, and now Portugal will follow, where this is possible. The expertise that we have in Belgium, we want to make an important contribution to new international regulation about that. And in reality, things are happening. In September 2021, only 2 months later, a 4-meter-long unmanned surface vehicle called Mahi-2 was launched from Spain by a Belgian team of 6 young engineers with the aim to cross the Atlantic Ocean. And on 14th of March, the Mahi-2 arrived in Martinique, in the Caribbean. And it's the first unmanned surface vehicle in the world to cross the Atlantic on purely solar energy. You were talking about 2016 with the flight. We didn't do it. It wasn't a Belgian. But these were 6 Belgians. 6 young Belgians. And it has covered a distance, an amazing distance of 8,000 kilometers in just under 6 months. So we have numerous small companies that are active in that field. For example, take the company CFAR, a company working on automating coastal and inland shipping, or .Ocean, another Belgian company that collaborates with the Navy on autonomous patrolling vessels. And they all can freely experiment their technologies in our North Sea. So it's not the government that's doing it. We're creating a framework, and the companies are doing the work. And we do it with small startups, bigger companies like Hydes, who's now active since 2020, I think, in Portugal and Belgium. Very proud of that company. But also with big companies like Exmar or DEME. DEME is here present today. DEME would like to be active in deep sea mining, which is, of course, a very delicate issue. But what we are doing in Belgium is, instead of having those 2 parties confronting themselves, trying to put them in the same line, what we are doing is, okay, we have Greenpeace, we know those NGOs, and I appreciate them, and you have the companies. And we're putting them together at the same table, led by scientists. Because with COVID, we saw that science is important, and serious people take into account science. And so we've put them around the same table, and we see that they are asking the questions, the right questions. And what we're doing today is respect the precautionary principle. Have an answer to all these questions before you start effectively exploring. So let away the taboos. Look at the science. See what science says, and then act. Other companies like Yandano, but also Sioen, company that is represented here today by Bert Grunendaal. I think he will speak through Zoom, but you will see beautiful solutions. So I'm very optimistic. We have a blue cluster in Belgium of about 200 companies active in the blue economy. And it's not a subsidized economy, it's a true economy. When I look at the beautiful city of Ostend, you know Ostend? You know the city of Ostend? The capital of the Belgian coast? We've seen a whole blue economy starting because of the windmill parks. Our predictions go to 16,000 new jobs by 2030, thanks to the blue economy. The whole economy is shifting. And that's a true opportunity that we would take with both hands. And that goes for all kinds of companies. Like I've said, small startups, growing companies, and of course, our proud multinationals. So I think much has been achieved. And I think the crisis and the war that we have in Ukraine, okay, that's not a positive thing that is happening. But at the same time, when we speak about energy independence, I mean, this is the best thing happening for Europe, sorry to say so, but it forces us to look at new solutions, and the blue economy is part of that. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to wrap it up. I think when I see here the sessions that you will present today, the issues, the topics that are raised, I'm pretty confident that that will give a boost to our economy, and because we all have the same conviction that Da Gama had 500 years ago, that through innovation, the ocean has the potential to transform economy. Well, 500 years later, we will do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you to all the participants in this opening session. Now we will have to start the first session, but I would like to thank again all the participants in this session. I know that especially the Secretary of State and Minister will have to run now to their next appointments, but thank you for coming. I will walk you to the door. And now I will ask Frederico Ferreira for Oceana that will indeed lead the first session to come here to this stage and ask for the participants to join him. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I think we are ready to start panel 1 on energy and transportation. First of all, I want to thank the Belgian-Portuguese Chamber of Commerce. It's the 4th edition of the Belgian-Portuguese Roots on Blue Economy. I participate, I believe, in almost all of them, but Forencien participate in all, I think. So I'm very glad to be here, and I excuse in the name of my Secretary General, Ruben Ayres, that was supposed to moderate the session, but a lot of things are going on, and so he wasn't able to moderate this one, and I will do it in the name of Forencien. Forencien is the Portuguese Blue Economy Cluster, so we are very happy to be here. We have a special relation with the Blau Cluster from Belgium also, so we have a MOU with them, and we are both part of the European Network of Maritime Clusters, and Blue Economy for us is our goal, blue as a sustainable blue economy. So, and this first panel is right about it. So, since we are short in time, I will give the floor to the first speaker, António Sarmento from WAVEC. For the Portuguese ones, I think they don't need presentation. Everyone knows António Sarmento is working on marine renewables for a long time. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Frederico. Thank you also to the Belgian-Portuguese Chamber of Commerce and also Moraes Leitão for this kind of invitation. I was asked to present you some new ideas to capture ocean wind energy in Europe, and I could choose to give you some presentation on technical challenges, but I decided to go in another direction, non-technical direction. But first, let me just give you a brief doesn't work. Sorry, there is something here.
It disappeared from the screen.
Yeah.
Someone technical assistant?
No. Well, I will proceed without the first slide. Basically, to tell you a little bit of WAVEC. WAVEC is a center of excellence for marine renewable energies. And we are very much involved in floating offshore wind, also in wave energy. We are also looking to hydrogen production offshore, and production and storage, and also on floating solar PV. Indeed, we are jointly with a Belgian company in EU SCORES, which is a project basically to demonstrate solar photovoltaics in the ocean. Okay, thank you very much. So, so I will be a bit provocative, and the reason is because I want to pass you a strong message. And this message is, first, of course, I recognize the relevance of marine protected area, but the question is whether we can do better than that. And I believe we can do better than that. As I said, I will be a bit provocative, but I believe on what I'm going to present you. There is a clear understanding of the role of the oceans, so I will not address this anymore. And my point is that offshore wind farms can do much better than just being a maritime protected area. And I'm going to present you why. And I would like that this message would be somehow understood this week on the UN Conference of the Oceans. But before that, let me just give a brief overview of what marine renewable energy represents or may represent at the world scale. It is estimated that the total theoretical potential annually is 276,000 terawatt hours. That represents the double of the total energy consumption in the world, not electricity, energy consumption. But of course, only a small part of this can be produced under economic and environmental conditions, about 5%. But these 5%, 14,000 terawatt hours, represent the present electricity consumption in the world. So it's very, very significant. And when we look into the different sources, we have first wind. Wind represents almost everything here, more than 90%. Waves, and that represents 15,000 terawatt hours per year. Waves represent about 10% of this, and the other sources about 1%. And if we look into the readiness of the technology, we see that wind is mature, TRL 9 means mature technology. Waves, about 6, that is still ongoing, the development. We still need a few years. And about the same, 6 to 8, depending on the sources, for tidal, old-tech, or salinity gradient. Now, what I would like to address is the following. How much area do we need to achieve the goals that the European Union has set? And I took here information that I got from Repower Europe, which sets for 2030, maybe a bit later, 480 gigawatts. About 1/3 of this should be offshore. So let's take 150 gigawatt for offshore wind. And if we take 5 megawatts per square kilometers, which is, say, more or less a standard, that gives about 100,000 square kilometers of area that we need. And if we do an estimation of what are the total coastal waters in Europe, it's about 1.5 billion square kilometers. But because of the environmental or the visual impacts, we need to go only from 6 miles, nautical miles, offshore until 12. So that's about half of this. And if we look into what are the area under marine protected area at present, my estimation is 340,000 square kilometers. So about 1/4 of the total coastal waters. But of course, we need to understand that part of this area is used for fishing grounds, also for navigation, for defense, and of course, only part of the remaining area has the sufficient wind resource to be used. So my conclusion is that there will be possibly limitations for the offshore wind development if we don't do anything differently. And, well, I already mentioned this, so I will pass except for this last point. There is a report issued last year, July last year, by a number of marine biologists, including people from my home institution, that concluded that wind farms are very effective means of marine protected area for the benthic communities, that is, for the communities that live on the ocean floor. And that leads me to the question whether we could use wind farms to go beyond marine protected areas. So that means changing the paradigm, not looking to wind farms as, say, something that we need to have with a negative, possibly negative impact on the ocean, but looking to wind farms as possibly something that can be better than just having the wind farms there. We have been listening today of multiple uses of the maritime space, and that is indeed what I'm planning to, or my views is on that, but also understanding that these other uses of the ocean indeed can represent a benefit for that area. So, and the first point that I would like to address you is the following. Wind farms is the area in the ocean where we can gather more information. To give you an idea, For each square kilometer in a wind farm, companies spend about 1 million euros in data gathering, metocean, geophysical, and geotechnical. This represents an expenditure that no government can do by itself. So if we are able to work with these companies, we are able to understand, to get very much detailed information on that area of the ocean. The second point...
30 seconds.
Oh, sorry.
No, I'm sorry. 1 minute.
Okay. The other point is that because we have a number of floating platforms in the area, we can have monitoring stations there and continuously provide data that allow us to understand what is the status of that part of the ocean. And then we can introduce seaweed. Seaweed, basically, they capture CO2, so they are providing a better water quality in that area. And we can have seaweed. Seaweed basically filter the water, so we are improving the water quality. So basically, what I'm saying is that if we have offshore wind, and possibly also wave or solar PV, but if we have algae aquaculture and seaweed aquaculture, we are improving the quality of those waters. And we are improving marine biomass, both in terms of quantity and diversity. And we are creating jobs, new businesses, and so we are able to indeed move from something that I would like to call marine enhanced areas. That is, areas where we produce much more on a sustainable way, with data that can be used on digital twins, not only in the area of the farm itself, but around it. And so we can provide a stamp of quality of that water and all the products that are coming from that water, either harvest or fish. And that is, we can improve the added value of those products.
Okay.
So, just to complete.
You have to conclude.
Yes, I'm going to conclude. We are talking about a protected area against navigation and fishing, very well monitored, where we enhance the water quality and foster biomass growth and diversity while creating jobs and new businesses, an area that we may say that we know as well as our hands because of the detail of data that we are able to gather there. So an area, as I said, where we can say assign a step of quality, and that is moving from marine protected areas to marine enhanced areas. That is my key message. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I believe you bring an important message when we want targets. Sometimes we also know we need to see the challenges and this space challenge to reach the targets of marine offshore, and renewables is for sure a good way to put it, and data will be an essential tool to monitoring all the ocean. So it's a very, very good idea that you brought here. So now the next speaker, I think he will speak through Zoom, from Casimir Morobe from Tokwa. He will talk about a different kind of subject, but also very interesting regarding the emissions of shipping and using artificial intelligence to reduce this impact. So the floor is yours. You have 7 minutes. Thank you.
Okay. I'm Casimir. I'm hoping you can hear and see me. Yes, great. Okay. So thanks for having me. I very much like the energy in the room, the optimism about the blue economy, and I hope my presentation can add to that enthusiasm. So I'm Casimir, the founder of Tokwa. We're an AI startup from Ghent in Belgium. And our goal is to reduce the emissions in the shipping industry using AI. Toco actually got founded after I wrote my master's dissertation together with the Belgian shipping company CMB, looking at how data from ships can be used to reduce emissions. And then it grew into a company because we believe the potential, the fuel-saving potential of AI should be adopted by the whole shipping industry. So let's look at how shipping can decarbonize today. Oversimplifying it, there's roughly 3 options. The biggest solution is alternative fuels. That will be the only way to get to zero emissions, but it's something that needs some more time to develop. It's also costly and slow to implement. Another alternative are retrofits, so in new types of paint, propellers, more efficient equipment really. And then the first category is operational optimizations, and that's where our focus lies as a company, is really what fuel savings are possible today to save emissions. So it's really optimizing with what we already have. And that's where our focus lies as Toco. Now, we use AI to reduce emissions through optimizations, but first, before we jump into AI, I know AI has really become a buzzword. A lot of people are a bit skeptic about it, and you're rightly to be so. I mean, the first rule of AI is actually to start without AI. AI is pretty complex, costly, time-consuming, sometimes hard to explain how it works. So if you can get similar results without using artificial intelligence, then it's recommended to do so. There's actually very few cases where the added complexity and the added cost, the added accuracy and added intelligence of AI is worth the effort. Now, I'm here to argument that the cases we work are on such cases, but before we jump in, let's respect the first rule. Let's look at how ship performance modeling is done today in the industry without AI. So ship performance modeling is a relationship between the speed of a ship and the power or the fuel consumption of a ship. And in theory, it could be something like the red line, but in practice, when we look at data, it becomes like the blue data. It's very noisy, very scattered, and it's because it's a very complex thing to model. You have the impact of the waves, the wind, the currents, the loading conditions, the degradation of the hull over time that add noise. So it becomes a very noisy relationship that's hard to analyze. And that's where we apply AI on. So we take data on the waves, the wind, the angles, the currents, the draft conditions, the trim, all possible parameters, and we put it in an AI model that learns what's the impact of these features on the performance of the ship, and then using the AI that's trained, we can compensate for the factors and remove a lot of the noise, so we can really clear up the analysis. So that's in a very much in a nutshell what we do at Toco. Now the question is then, how can this save fuel? And that's where this is focused on, right? On pilots, on making stuff happen today. And there's 3 things I'd like to discuss here briefly. First one is predictive maintenance. We've seen can save up to 6%. Second one is voyage optimization, can save up to 5%. And the last one doesn't save fuel in itself. It's validating the fuel savings of ongoing projects, which is also very necessary. Now, these might seem like small numbers, but adding up all the optimizations we're working on, it can go up to like 15% fuel savings or even 20%, which in absolute numbers is absolutely huge given the amount of emissions that the shipping industry has. So if we can reach these numbers on a world scale, that would reduce the emissions by 3 times the carbon emissions of the carbon footprint of Switzerland, the country. So there's really a huge impact to be had here, even with limited percentages. I'll go a bit more in depth on the first 2 cases, but maybe I'll talk a bit about the last one now. And it's validating fuel savings. Today, there's lots of pilots going on, lots of POCs, lots of projects, things are being tried out, but it's very hard to validate how effective are these projects because of the noise I showed before. And a very important thing we do is remove all the noise and then make it very clear, okay, this action, this type of propeller, this optimization, this paint, etc., saved X% in fuel consumption in this test case. And then you have the numbers before you roll it out to the whole fleet. That's not only for very big ships, because that's usually our clients are very big shipping companies, but we're also looking at a project like this with the Belgian fisheries on how can we validate the savings of their decarbonization projects before they roll it out to the whole fishing fleet. But the other use cases are more focused on big industrial deep sea shipping. So the first case is maintenance optimization. It's deciding when to do hull cleanings. So it's sending divers into the water to remove the marine growth on the side of the ship, which can increase fuel consumption by 30–40% due to increased drag. Today, we see the industry has a very reactive maintenance strategy when it comes to this. They wait very long, wait too late actually, before they do the cleaning. because they don't have enough insights. There's too much noise to identify the underperformance. The problem with fouling here is that once it becomes very big, it gets attached into the paint. And to remove it then, you need very aggressive removal techniques that also remove the paint and get it into the water, but also the paint degrades and in the long term, so you get into a sort of vicious performance degradation cycle. That's bad for performance economically, but it's also bad for biodiversity because you get marine invasive species, you get the toxical paints that get into the water, so it's really a lose-lose situation. We want to nudge the industry to the right, where they go to a proactive maintenance strategy, where they clean on time, where the fouling is only small organisms that can be removed lightly without damaging the paint, without having any invasive species, and it can also save a lot of fuel. So this is just a case for one ship we worked out, and we analyzed it could save over $500,000 in fuel savings per ship per year. So it's not only an ecological use case, it's very economical as well, and that's why it works and why we believe it's scalable. So that's the first case, the first pilot. The second pilot is...
You have 1 minute, so please be more, speed up. Thank you.
I will, thanks. Second one is voyage optimization. So it's basically the shortest route is not always the best route. If you can avoid bad weather or speed up and slow down at the right times, you can also save fuel. And by having better models at the core, you can have additional fuel saving there. So then our last slide, they asked us what we need to scale up to have more impact with this. Well, first of more users. So the more ships that use these models, the more impact you have. But secondly, an important thing we identify in deep sea shipping is that there's a need for more collaboration between ship owners, charterers, ship managers, ports, etc. It's a very fragmented industry and everybody's doing their own thing. But I think really people need to start looking over their own wall and work together, because there's lots of very easy fuel savings possible by just working more together and aligning interests. And then lastly, more pressing regulations will definitely help our cause. We feel that this is the reason there's more and more attention to concepts like ours, is because of the regulations. But unfortunately, we see a lot of stuff is only aimed to the mid to long term, but we really feel there's a need for more ambitious short-term goals as well with real consequences, because the technology is there to change, but there needs to be a driver behind it, and usually that has to be regulations. So that's basically it. Those are the use cases I wanted to share, and I look forward to it.
Also to address the challenge of shipping, a lot of exports and the transport of goods are by shipping in all the world, in Europe. So finding solutions that in the short term can reduce fuel, it's very important in emissions. So next speaker will be Jorge Antunes, that will also have an interesting title for his presentation, the carbonization, the shipping dilemma. So the floor is yours, George.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Ladies first. Sorry. I'm not that confident on all these politician views, as politicians are dreamers, and people that dream, very often they are away from the industry. Now, let me see, does this work? Well, I'm going to skip some lots of slides because this is a very serious problem. Technovertus is a company of marine engineering with 30 years of experience. Okay. We have been investing quite a lot on the research and development of hydrogen solutions, and also heavy fuel oil desulfurization and revamping and digitalization of fleets. So we are called the doctors of the ships. We have a number of recognitions, and also we have done the first big circular economy project for a ship called Vasco da Gama, that was a 27-year-old vessel that was revamped, and right now is as green as the greenest that are launched to water nowadays. So saying this, just to show you one of our solutions, that is the use of LOHC, so liquid hydrogen oil hydrogen carriers. Sorry, and so this may bring a new window, a new hope for having hydrogen on board vessels to be used on internal combustion engines, not on fuel cells, because these fuel cells until now are not sufficiently reliable and do not have the power required for the big ships. So the carbonization. So the carbonization is one point, but the growth of the economy and the world is being literally smashed. So global economy is based on heavy carbonized industry, transport, and social asymmetries, okay? So what I'm trying to say is that regarding the overall emitters, so the shipping will be the sixth bigger polluter in terms of atmospheric pollutants, okay? So we have China, and then around the shipping, the position of the shipping is the sixth. So the worst emitting company is MSC. So it pollutes more than a lot of power plants, coal power plants. So these are statistics. So some considerations on the carbonization. And now, just to let you know, I'm just trying to shock you as much as possible, okay? So the impact of shipping on the societies is just about the impact of the societies on the shipping, okay? So we need it. The shipping response to the world economy by itself reflects the interests of the economies and societies. The carbonization through relocalization of manufacturing facilities, it is for sure one of the best solutions, okay? Bring the industries to nearby the consumers, so this means to Europe. Rethinking of the world economy in terms of sustainability, it is absolutely crucial, as bringing the production to Europe, for example, will reduce dramatically the youth unemployment, okay? So young people need to work. And finally, the economy markets must be changed, so the rules of the global economy must be changed, okay? So polluting in China and bringing the goods to Europe, it is just a little bit cynical, but anyhow, the causes and remedies. So shipping is stressed on regulations and policies, on expectations of cargo owners and consumers, and also access to investors and capital, okay? So long-term industry shifted to Asia. So the relocation of industries nearby the consumers, it is a good way to improve this. Long-term pressure on the markets to get very low freight rates. So at the end of the story, the consumers will be paying for this decarbonization. And investors and banks need to understand that new ships are more energy, that are not necessarily more efficient, okay? So, and now I'm going to skip now this. So this is the cost of fuel that 1 year ago was just about 360 euros a ton of marine gas oil. Right now, it is above $1,000, so 1,000 euros. So this means that ship owners...
1 minute.
Oh, okay. And these are the CO2 emissions. The world fleet is more than 15 years old. So it is too young to destroy, to abate. But it is still judged by many people that they should replace new ships with all the inherent CO2 emissions and not only. I'm going to skip this. Also, the strategy, the long-term strategy for China to control the ports has been, and it will be a big problem for European Union and Western world to solve. So, and finally, the emissions, and please let me show this, pay attention to this. So these here are the two routes that are possible to bring goods from China to Europe, okay? And these have been in great dispute. Imagine and check out this table. A cargo ship, so a container ship to bring cargo from Rotterdam to Shanghai, or from Rotterdam, Hong Kong, or Shanghai to Rotterdam, or Hong Kong to Rotterdam, has emissions in excess or just about 20,000 tons of CO2 during 30 days of navigation. These ships bringing goods for Europe will be emitting just about 20,000 tons of CO2. Think about it, okay? Regarding the mortality around the world, we can see Portugal and north of Europe with an incidence of lung cancer that is absolutely a nightmare. Why? Because during one day, during 24 hours, more than 300 ships are crossing our waters up and down, just in front of our coast, okay?
Please
and we
conclude,
are not,
George, okay? Conclude.
Yeah, okay, so the funny thing is that this has been identified by the European Union a long time ago. And it looks that everybody are doing like the monkeys, closing the eyes, closing the mouth and the ears. And for the politicians that are here, we have a very strong numbers, very strong numbers. So the mortality costs only to Denmark something like in the year 2000, 627 million euros. Just diseases due to shipping. We are the consumers. We are the people that are paying for these ships to come here. Okay, I have a lot more to say, but
thank you very much.
Just to finish. One other thing that I would like to stress to all the politicians is that there is no ammonia for everybody, especially with the Ukrainian war. There is no ammonia for marine applications. There is no methanol for marine applications. We need it now. We don't have. There is no such fuels on the market. Forget it. Ammonia is for fertilizers, to make food for people that will be starving next winter. And I'm sad.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
Thank you. The time, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time, so we need to go on, but a lot of things interesting to be said and to be discussed. So with no further ado, I will pass the floor to Jan Navralti from Solvay, that will talk through Zoom, and this presentation is Smart Emissions Removal from Onshore to Offshore Solutions. So the floor is yours, Jan. Try to stick in the 7 minutes if you can. Thank you.
I'll do my best. Can you hear me all right? Everything okay? Okay, excellent. So I will go through very quickly through introduction. I represent Solvay. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to participate, to talk about the project, the pilot projects that we have run and that we are currently investigating. On this slide, I just wanted to give you a brief introduction of Solvay, but quite honestly, all you have to do is that we have a global presence. We are a relatively large multinational company, and we are focusing on sustainability and innovation heavily. We are the manufacturer of chemicals, and the division that I work for is actually manufacturing a sodium bicarbonate that has been used for decades already on the land installations in order to do a desox, in order to do a PM removal. Okay, so this technology that I'll be presenting you is actually not a novelty. This has been used for the last 30 years in incinerators. It has been used in power plants, and we do believe that eventually this regulation that is currently posed on land installations will come to the marine industry as well. So how does it work? Well, from the engine, you have a gas that is full of emissions. We inject the solvent, which in this case it's the sodium bicarbonate. It goes through some sort of a filter, which is of course optional because the PM is not regulated in the marine industry, and that a pity. But if there is a baghouse filter, we can actually capture these particles, and quite a lot of them for that matter, and then you have a clean air that is being released to the environment. The reason why this works so well is that if you have a look at these two pictures, on the left-hand side you see a sodium bicarbonate as it is when it's produced. On the right-hand side you see the spongy consistency. Now, for those of you that haven't picked up on it just yet, sodium bicarbonate, it's a bake powder. I mean, this is a different grade of the bake powder, of course, but it is fundamentally the same chemical. This spongy consistency is when you expose the bake powder or the sodium bicarbonate to heat. Once you do that, it actually starts doing a similar thing than your cake when you are baking it. It creates these little bubbles. Now these bubbles, they're going to suck in the emissions, they're going to capture them, and we're going to capture it with a filter. So nothing really escapes the system. Now let's dive in right away into the pilot projects that we have worked on or that we are planning to work on. First of all, there is a vessel in Mediterranean, it's a Ropax ferry Piana, that is cruising between Corsica and southern France, Marseille. Marseille traditionally has had quite a lot of problems with the air pollution because it's one of the major ports, and there has been repeated complaints of the population to do something about it. Well, Piana is the first vessel of its kind because it's, since early this year, fully retrofitted and is actually capturing 99.9% of particles that are coming out of the stack, which, of course, it's a little bit ahead of its time because the PM is not regulated, but they were able to pull it off. They care about the sustainability in our environment, and as such, this vessel is currently sailing and doing not only DSOx, but also PM removal. And if we are successful, it should be able to do DNOx as well. There is another vessel that is sailing in the Baltic, and this one, well, let's just say it's a little bit less sustainable. I mean, in principle, they are not doing anything wrong, but they are not using any filtration whatsoever. So they are releasing the residues, or in this case, they are calling it the dust particles, because simply they can. And I find it a little laughable how marine industry is a little conservative in a sense that whatever is not forbidden is allowed. But in any case, they are using the system, they are fully compliant, they are injecting sodium bicarbonate, they are treating the DSOx, and of course, for the transition period, they say they will be using it without a filter. Eventually, we do believe that PM regulation is just the next logical step within the marine industry. So why exactly talk about this? What's the implication for the ports, for instance, or for the coastal areas, where we can take this technology that already is sailing on vessels. We have proven concept that it works on vessels where space and weight and all sorts of indicators are difficult, and we can actually put it on land, or we can put it on barge. So we can take the exact technology and we can build it on the land. We can perhaps put some sort of a cap on the funnel, and we can be doing treatment of particles, of DSOx, DNOx, whatever, from the land. Now, this concept is actually not new. This has been already tried in 2014 and at Port of Los Angeles and San Diego. This wasn't us. This was a different company, but they tried. How successful they were, I don't know, because since that time, I haven't really heard anything about it. In any case, as I said, the technology is not new. Another interesting look at things is if we install the same on the barges. Now, here you can see a nice picture of a barge. We collaborated with the company Andritz, which is the equipment manufacturer back on the trial when we were running a trial on Piana. And we thought that for, the port traffic, it would be also interesting if we put the system on a barge. When the ship is maneuvering already, we can bring the barge, secure it by the vessel, put a little cap with the crane on the funnel, and we can be doing the treatment again, thus protecting the health and the lives of the people that are living nearby the coastal areas. Now,
Jan, 1 minute, please.
Okay, I will conclude. There are certain things that we are currently looking at, what we could do. So for instance, the basic system that has no dedusting, we are looking at the ways on how to do it in a simpler manner through the use of cyclones, for instance. As I already said, we are already investing our time and energy into a DNOx, so 3-in-1 solution, DSOx, DNOx, and PM removal. We are also looking at the possibilities on how to combine the system with the CO2 removal. That pretty much concludes my presentation, and I would like to just finish with the last remark. This is particularly important, or I see this as particularly important for Portugal, where ports like Lisboa has a great commercial value, but at the same time, it's a prime destination for people that are traveling. And it is my belief that they don't want to be looking at the ships that are emitting this really lovely black smoke that comes out every time that they start the ship. We as Solvay, or our team as Solvay Marine, can help with that. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Ian, and for keeping strict of the time. So thank you very much for that efficient that we also need in these kind of solutions to reduce the emissions of shipping. So that's conclude our panel. I think we don't have time for more, just saying that we need to search for smart solutions and to the challenge that we face. And like the Minister of Belgium said, we need to put science, bring the knowledge to the economy, find these solutions and find the solutions and create also value and a sustainable economy for us all, and especially for Portugal and Belgium. So thank you very much. And now the floor is for the panel 2. Thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, honored guests, I understand the desire to discuss is really huge, but I think it's also important to respect the time assigned to all of the speakers, since they have prepared to be here. So while I will invite my speakers to the panel, I will quickly introduce myself. My name is Anne-Katrien Leskrowaat. My name, difficult one. I'm from Flanders Marine Institute, and I'm Director International Relations there. And the topic we have today is a very exciting one. It is about nature-based solutions, and it is a topic that is very close to the restoration economy and also about nature-inspired design. So they're very closely connected. And for those of you who are not very familiar with the topic, it's actually about working with nature instead of against nature. So it's about using natural processes to help us to achieve our goals. Of course, and I want to say that this concept is not new. It's already enshrined in high-level documentation, such as those that emitted by the United Nations, but also in very operational elements. And I'm looking specifically at our representative of the European Commission here, because instruments such as the Horizon Europe and the Mission Ocean that looks at solution-oriented research has really taken up this concept. So without further ado, I would just like to say that to work with nature, of course, you have to, and natural process, we have to understand these processes. So that's a huge work. We have to go with baby steps. And meanwhile, I'm waiting for Mark Huygens. He's arriving, thank you. So I would like to introduce our three speakers, and they will bring each of them 3 different examples about how nature-based solutions work in practice. So they're people of practice, and they're practitioners. But what I see is that something they have in common, all of them, is that they all embrace, they're pioneers because they all embrace the multidisciplinary need to be able to develop these pilots. So we have an engineer reaching out to a marine ecologist. We have a biologist seeking solutions with about physical erosion with engineers. So they're all pioneers in the sense that they work on pilots, but they also work reaching out to different disciplines. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker. He's Diogo Mendes from HIDES, this company. And Diogo is an expert in coastal resilience. He has a PhD on civil engineering of the Instituto Superior Técnico de Lisboa, and he will speak about how aquatic vegetation can be used to mitigate coastal problems. So we're all ears. Diogo, please, floor is yours. 7 minutes if possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I think that there is a problem on the presentation. Because maybe switch the presentation. The presentations were switched.
Yes. Yes, sorry. I just see that it's the wrong presentation. Yeah. So unless, if you're comfortable, let's
switch.
Let's switch if you're comfortable with that. Yes. Yeah. Sorry about that. Technical.
No problem. No problem. I start without introduction then, Sri? No problem. But
sorry, very quickly. This is what happened. So again, Mark Huygens is actually serving at DEME, and he's a manager for environmental services. So again, the engineer reaching out to the environmentalist. So you will present to us the coastal management, nature-based solutions, so the coast busters and the bank busters. So please help us to understand this attractive concept.
Thank you very much for the introduction. What I'd like to take you within this journey is to have a kind of introduction about how can we implement and how can we go one step further in applying nature-based solutions. So I will not run into detail about, let's say, the technical features and the details about, indeed, coast busters and bank busters. I will only quickly introduce the concepts that are within the R&D projects, because there are 2 R&D projects running in the Flemish environment, in the Belgian environment, and I'd like to stress a little bit more into the focus on what are the next steps to be taken. So I will run rather quickly through the coast busters and bank busters, but basically what we are doing in coast busters is trying to find or to use, let's say, biogenic reefs, and that can be floral reefs, or that can be laniche reefs, or that can be bivalve reefs, so natural elements, in order to stabilize and in order to be integrated in your coastal zone management. And without running into detail, what we want to do is to stabilize the foreshore of your coastal area with these kind of biogenic reefs in order to, let's say, facilitate the recovery of the natural coastal system, and in order also to have a more resilient overall system of integrated coastal zone management. So we are no longer talking about coastal protection, saying holding the line, but we are talking about a coastal zone management of a whole zone, of a whole bunch of several meters close to the interaction between land and sea at your coastal area. Again, basically we are starting from very basic aquaculture setups, as you see it here on the slides. And what we are trying to do is trying to collect natural elements in order to facilitate the development of the biogenic reefs. People who are really like to learn a lot more details about Coastbusters, please come and see us at the website, but also you can contact me after this presentation. But what you see, for instance, on this slide is also a view on what we call then, in a very practical way, the mussel shaker, in the sense that the vertical element that you see, the yellow vertical element, is surrounded by vertical ropes where the mussel is catched, is growing on that aquaculture-like device, and it is then dropping off on the local seabed in order to form a biogenic reef. So by that I explain, let's say, in 2 lines, the technical concept of Coastbusters. I will now run into Bankbusters, and basically there it's about restoring tidal marshes along estuarine tidal rivers, let's say. So what we see there is that due to the increasing navigation, due to the increasing sea level, the tidal entrance volume is increasing. So the banks are eroded, and a lot of very sensitive area like marshlands are disappearing. So what we are doing here in this project, in this called Bankbusters project, we are using the dredge material that is needed to keep, let's say, the navigation channel on depth, to restore part of that bank ecosystem and to recover and to facilitate the recovery of the tidal marshes on that particular land. So here you get a picture of this kind of eroded banks that we are used to see in this particular case along the river Scheldt. So what we are trying to do, we try to recover part of that interaction between the river and the river banks in a more natural way by using dredge material. So we're talking about beneficial use of dredge material. And by that, I like to stress a little bit also, just by running through a little more slides on the project itself, that as a marine contractor, one of the things that I've heard from the political forum before is that they're really focusing on protecting the marine environment. So what we are like to do, of course, is go beyond protection and trying to engineer, trying to facilitate the natural processes, going much further than the protection of it, in the sense that, well, try to create a little bit more the natural processes or put them back in the right direction by engineering them. And I have no ambition on replacing natural processes, but I have a strong ambition on facilitating these kind of natural processes. So that's the position of a marine contractor, being proud of being working in this kind of environment. So again, a few slides to show what is Bankbusters about. Already also kind of details, but what I really like to stress on in this small talk is what are the key enablers to have a step further in these nature-based solutions, because it's also very nice to have a kind of R&D program and a lot of very nice scientific talking, which is really crucial. But indeed, we should also think about what's the next step. If we want to put nature-based solutions on the business platform, perhaps there should be taken some further steps. And a few of these steps I'd like to share with you. And The first one I would like to stress on is that we should really know what kind of ecosystem we are working in the sense that, and there we need scientists, we need the data of the site, but we also need more than the traditional data. We need to know what are the sensitive receptors, for instance, in this ecosystem. So what are really the species that to be taken care of, for instance. So we should know very nice, what I call here in this slide, a baseline study of the local ecosystem, just as a kind of common ground to start from thinking about nature-based solutions. And the other thing, or the next step, is to have some talks about, let's say, integrating a design or a full process of your project. So starting from design, you should already be thinking about integration different aspects in your project. So from design up to the engineering, up to the installation, up to the management, up to the decommissioning of your project, you should think in an integrated manner. And what does it mean? It means that you should be as tunable as possible, as adaptive as possible. So it means that we are used to work on a very practical and very pragmatic thing. I'm an engineer, so I know that that's the problem. We're going to do a calculation, and that's the solution. The solution is fixed because it's stable, it is calculated. No, today we are talking about nature-based solutions, we are talking about tunable things. We are talking about complex things, we are talking about very, let's say, dynamic things. So what we want to do is, right from the beginning, taking that into account, right from the design up to the engineering, to the whole management, to the whole decommissioning of your project. So we should be scalable, we should be adjustable, we should be used to deal with dynamics. And also that means that we should have a direct contact with your stakeholders, as mentioned here also, in the sense that being dynamic, being flexible is indeed being engaged with your local community, with your local stakeholders, because they also have their concerns, they also have their needs, they also have their questions. And last but not least, also the authority and the regulation should be tunable, adjustable, flexible, dealing with complexity. It's just a question I want to put on and share with you as a statement. Now let me run a little bit further, and one of the important things I like to stress on is also to have a new kind of monitoring program, because the way we see monitoring is having an observation about what is going on. What is going on today is much more complex in the nature-based solution, because we are talking not only about technical features, we're also talking about, for instance, ecological features. And I can tell you, perhaps there are quite a lot of marine biologists in this audience, it's much more complex to record ecological process than to record a technological process. So you need to be taking some further steps in your monitoring, not only to record that particular complexity of the processes of ecology, but also social process, for instance. But you also need an adapted monitoring to use that monitoring results in your management, in your further behavior of your system, and to follow up your nature-based solutions. Because taking into account complexity, taking into account the dynamics, needs some adaptive monitoring.
You have to wrap up, please. Yes.
One more last thing is that we also need a kind of monetarization, of course, because bringing the nature-based solutions up to the business level is, of course, very important. But bringing it in the business model does not mean you can make some money out of it. So we need a shift in business model. I have to say that from Katrien, in the sense that this is quite essential, in the sense that the traditional business model should be surpassed. We cannot monetize everything. So when we're talking about ecosystem services, which is one of the topics that is used to have a kind of valorization of these nature-based solutions, perhaps we should not run into discussion about the money value. We should run into discussion about how to adapt the business model of the future. And with that, I'd like to end up this presentation. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Mark. I know you wanted to tell us much more, but as you said, you're free, the audience is free to speak to Mark after this presentation. And I hope the next presentation is now the right one, so that Diogo can take...
Just speak, Diogo.
Yes. And while Diogo is taking place, I want to thank Mark for reminding us that this process really takes co-design from the beginning. And I noticed in your slides that you also have collaboration with Flanders government and with universities. So thanks for reminding that, and thanks also for putting the ecosystem services in the equation of this business model. And I understand that Diogo will be speaking also about that, the ecosystem services. And he will speaking now it's his turn to speak about aquatic vegetation. Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Diogo Mendes, and here I will represent AIDIS as a company, consulting engineering company. And the topic that I will talk about it is nature-based solution to create coastal resilience from one side and also to regenerate biodiversity. And when we work near the coast, so between the border of the ocean and the coast, we can talk about coastal challenges. And this is not a new topic, every one of us know. And when I talk about coastal challenges, I can mean overtopping, for example. I can mean huge disasters during large hurricanes in the US, and I can also mean large amounts of CO2 emissions during in inland waterways, for example, and also these inland waterways are associated with dredging costs to keep the channels with some water depth. And so, for example, these are some of the coastal challenges. And one of the things is that when we talk about challenges, we as engineers, we also have some solutions. And so I will now present some of the solutions. For example, common engineering solutions. Let's say the known gray solutions like groins, seawalls, or breakwaters. Coastal engineering solutions have limitations, and also the widely known yellow solutions or white solutions such as beach nourishment. So one of the topics about beach nourishment is that these kind of solutions are not always there. So they can be placed there just and they will follow and maintain for, let's say, 2 or 3 years and can isolate and can protect us against storms, but they will not be always there. But the majority of common engineering coastal solutions do not, and this is one important thing, is do not promote nature during their lifetime. And for example, if we look to a graph, let's say that the y-axis is biodiversity creation, and we look for these 3 types of solutions, the gray solutions and the white solutions, they do not promote, for example, biodiversity creations during their life span. And we still need to understand if these green solutions are able to promote nature during their lifetime. And so one of the questions is, can novel engineering solutions inspired by nature contribute both to coastal challenges and become a coastal solutions, and so they can promote nature during their lifetime? And this will be my 2 take-home messages. So first is the internal project called OSCAR, and OSCAR is meant to be a nature-based solution to improve the resilience of coastal areas and to promote blue economy at local scale. And what OSCAR is? So the idea is to place vegetation or aquatic organisms at vertical floating long lines near the coast, and these will damp incoming waves and will reduce the risks of flooding during storms and so ever. So to reduce the wave height, wave overtopping, and also intertidal beach sediment loss. And one key message here is that this green solution will promote nature during its lifetime. This is the second take-home message. which is a project called Veronica, and this is due to the CO2 emissions that are released during the dredging of inland waterways. And in this project called Veronica, the idea is to place vegetation along the channel margin banks that will be able to trap sediments and reduce sedimentation inside the navigation channels. This will also contribute to reduce CO2 emissions since we are using less and less dredging vessels. Placement of vegetation near the margin banks. The initial preliminary studies that we did internally showed that this vegetation along the margin banks reduce the erosion, and so will reduce the sedimentation within the channel. And finally, this solution will reduce both, well, the erosion and also the sedimentation, and will decrease the dredging costs and the CO2 emissions. So this is one important thing about this solution. So without further ado, thank you all, and I will be very glad to
Thank you, Mr. Mendes, also for excellent timekeeping. And thank you for sharing with us these inspiring examples of coastal resilience. And I understand also that, as you said, it still needs to be valued, or properly valued, what the ecosystem services by these aquatic vegetation sources are. So we have work ahead, but it's important to keep them in the equation to have solid business models, as Mark just said. Thanks. And then our third speaker, I have not been able to talk to him, but I'm very, very curious to hear what he has to say. But because again, it is in this case Mr. Felipe Porteiro. He's a biologist by formation, I understand, from the University of Azores, and I understand he also worked as a very important policy maker, so I understand he has a very broad view of how to approach these nature-based solutions. But I'm particularly very interested to hear how you do that in a volcanic archipelago, and what kind of nature-based solutions you are looking for. So please inspire us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Chairman. Thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here to share with you my experience as not as a marine biologist, not as an engineering, but as a technical politician that worked on the coastal protection during 7 years in the Azores. So it was quite a complex subject, because I had no experience before on that, and I have not the knowledge to define the methodologies to protect the coastal areas in such an energetic environment. So we just contracted and outsourcing the coastal projects. And of course, as a marine biology interested on the protect and promote biodiversity and sustainable development, I would like to have and to promote nature-based solutions. But I found out that it's very, very challenging based on the present knowledge and based on the nature of the Azores nature. I would very briefly give you the geological settings of the Azores. There are 9 islands, very young. The youngest is less than 150,000 years, and the oldest 8 million years, with about 460 seamounts of volcanic origin, and dominated on the Azores Plateau. The Mid-Atlantic ridge, which is a slow spread ridge, it dominates the geological settings, and the Azores and the Azores triple junction as well, where the tectonic plates meet. So the island is about 1,000 kilometers, the coastline of the islands. It's a very complex system, and because it is the balance of volcanic accretion and the volcanic erosion that shape the islands as they are today. So the coastal areas in the Azores, it's characterized by high, steep multi-layered sea cliffs with lava, paleosoils, for example, tuffs, another layer of soils, another layer of lava. And so it turns out that it's very fragile and very vulnerable to erosion. So erosion acts very fast. The coastal areas, we have also this landslide, lava flows and landslides detritic platforms, which are detritic platforms are very easily eroded, sand and boulder beaches. And the submerged platform, island platform, is very steep and very deep. So tens of meters offshore, you may have 100 meters depth. So it's not like the examples that we have been, or that the colleagues of panel just showed before. In the climatic oceanographic settings, this is influenced by the Azores high pressure, very well known for everybody. It's on the southern boundary of temperate westerlies winds and in the North Atlantic Drift province. So it means that the currents and winds came from west, and the currents, the marine currents and jets is very, very active. So it's very windy and rainy, and in this warm temperate to subtropical climate. It's subject of intense frontal systems, depressions, and storms, including tropical cyclones and storms. So that amplifies all of that energetic systems, amplifies the energy of the wind and waves and swells that hit the shores. The human settlement. So traditionally, people just fixed on the coastal areas because they are very mountains, and for several reasons, because it's more easy accessible for communication in the former times where there were no routes. And of course that the climate is much milder on the lower lands for agriculture and for comfort. So, but it's very vulnerable. And the coastline instability is subject to very high erosion rates, up to 40 centimeters a year. It means that 300 years ago, when the first settlers came and they defined where they were to settle, and the coastline was quite far away. And suddenly, after time, they saw the coastline just came toward their homes, and finally the houses just fell down over the cliffs of the cliffs. So coastal protection, it's a key activity across all islands to safeguard people and economic assets, including some infrastructures or key infrastructures like harbors, and including also cultural assets. So the last 7 years, we spent about 20 million euros just for coastal protection. But 20 million was just the money that we could spend, because we needed much more. Of course, that the economic constraints limited our action. What we did, infrastructures for recovery and protection the assets, protection of lowlands from erosion, marine floats, and storm marine surges, mitigation of erosion over coastal cliffs. How we did it? We worked on the very small coastal works like small harbors and ramps, bathing areas, to large defense works with hundreds of meters length. So we used hard engineering techniques, mainly, like permanent and rockfill protections. Permanent, I would say not so permanent, but permanent in our scales, in time scales, concrete seawalls, and breakwaters. Other specialized works, consolidation curtains with using the sophisticated micro columns with concrete and the stainless steel, etc., and some other techniques that for use to support and to mitigate the erosion. So we tried to find out soft nature solutions, but we find out that then that they are very limited due to geological properties of the land, of the islands, and energetic erosion agents, both aerial and marine. And over the very exposed coastlines. We don't have this estuaries, estuarines ecosystem, so the coastline is very exposed, are very exposed. So we thought on the underwater reefs, as presented here, using some reef-building native marine coastal species, but we don't have those like mussels, or oysters used elsewhere. So, and of course, that underwater reefs are very vulnerable on energetic maritime storms or high cost associated, because the coastal areas is very steep and very deep. So it's, the investment should be very high. So it's not clear applied to volcanic oceanic islands as the Azores, the soft nature-based solutions. Challenge for coastal protections in light of this climate change. I think that it's improved mixed techniques, hard and soft, when possible, using native flora and some also fauna. Use preferentially basaltic rock, which is endogenous geological materials, and there's less impact on coastal ecosystems and can promote also biodiversity, not as a natural ecosystem, but it's the minimum, or it's a balance between protection and promote biodiversity. Meanwhile, what we do, it's a displacement of some of the most vulnerable settlements and infrastructures after cost-benefit analysis, mitigate human-induced erosive factors, for example, to pluvial drainage and domestic sewage, improve monitoring and prevention of disasters with loss of human lives and valued infrastructures, and learn from other experience and support applied research on the subject. Thank you very much, and it would be interesting to learn and to know more about you engineering, what you find the solutions for some energetic systems as volcanic oceanic islands. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Porteiro, for sharing the challenges that you face in such a volcanic environment. And also, I understand it's an open call because you want to move away from the traditional approaches. So that's an open call to explore with partners to see what potential there is for bioengineering of geoengineering type of solutions. So yeah, maybe some of these hanging aquaculture that can dissipate or absorb some of the wave energy, but that's something for the discussion. I want just to thank, in view of time, it's very unfortunate because I can just feel the desire to discuss, and I would like to join you in that discussion. So I would like to thank the speakers, especially those that have been very strict to themselves and keeping to time, all of you actually. And I want to thank you with a big applause. And I think everybody goes home with the idea and the desire to learn more about nature-based solutions. But let's just give a big applause to these pioneers and these people that are really putting into practice the embracing the multidisciplinarity, because we talk a lot about it, but it's difficult. So I think they deserve a big applause. Thank you. So I think now we come to the third and the last session. So I would like to give the floor to Mr. Gonzalo Carvalho. to start the last session. And meantime, we get some fresh water, and thank you all for your support to make this happen.
Good afternoon. We'll start the third and last panel. My name is Gonçalo Carvalho, and I'm from a marine conservation organization based in Portugal called Siena. But we do also work a lot in Brussels, coincidentally or not, but as we follow many European processes as well. I would like to thank the Belgian-Portuguese Chamber of Commerce for this very kind invitation. It is indeed important for us to listen to different stakeholders, and we try to do that as much as possible. This was indeed a very good opportunity to do so, and I've been listening and taking notes, and I will continue to do so during this third panel. Just some quick notes, of course, for coming from an NGO, a marine conservation NGO, you'll probably expect us to be very fearful about what companies can do, and that is true to some extent. But joking aside, we really believe that innovation and technology will have a crucial role in the so-called blue economy, and it is key that these solutions have a true environmental sustainability at the heart of it, and that indeed the companies can develop their work within the boundaries of the planet and respecting the different services and uses and good things that the ocean provides us. But I'm a strong believer that indeed the entrepreneurs and the companies can indeed be our allies in this objective. So with no further ado, I would give the floor to Paulo Serra Lopes from Aquazor. Please take the pulpit and you can do your presentation, which will be called New Aquaculture Systems in Portugal, the Blue Way Forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. Basically, I will bring you some projects done in the Azores Islands regarding aquaculture, but would first of all ask you to become alert that aquaculture in the future will be passing through major changes. We will probably have to use much of what the sea gives us. And we are facing, and we will talk a little bit further on that, we are facing seaweed invasions in our beaches and in our lands. And this is an enormous biomass that is coming to us. It's not exactly aquaculture because we are not culturing them, but we will have to use them. Aquaculture in the future will have to be flexible. We will have to face the challenges and develop strategies that will change with the time to face those challenges. First of all, we do have some regular aquaculture in the Azores. Sorry, I don't know where to point. Yeah, okay. We started this venture, Aquazor, in the Azores in late 2016. It was basically the first company that was developed in the Azores to do aquaculture in a, let's say, in a very practical way. We thought that in the beginning we had to try. We lacked to try the use of a special fish, which is Seriola do Marilli, in Portuguese, lídio. Okay. In Portuguese, the name is lídio. It's a well-known fish in the Azores, not so well-known in Portugal, but has an enormous market in the Japanese restaurants. So it will grow, and we believe it will become something like the salmon of the Southern Europe. And that's why we took it. Also, we thought that in the Azores environment, seaweeds would be a major species. So we took some like 20, 30 different species of seaweeds, which we are growing and making all sorts of experiments, dealing with some seaweeds that we do not culture, but that came to us in massive invasions, and we also dealt with it. Well, first of all, we had to establish a fish hatchery where we hatch the fish and where we produce the small fingerlings that would be taken into the sea to grow. We have so much sea around the Azores that our intention was, first of all, to go to the sea, to go offshore. We never thought in doing aquaculture inland. We selected a special cage and we tried to do everything that we can ourselves. We established the first hatchery where we grow the fish from the eggs to the fingerlings and from the fingerlings to the juveniles. They leave the hatchery with around 5 grams. And they then will go to the cage. Cage is an enormous structure that you can see here. It's about 20 meters wide, 20 meters long by 30 meters wide, and it can produce as much as 150 tons of fish. This structure is especially important because it will be kept underwater. Our cage, the top of our cage is more or less 15 meters underwater. So when storms come, they will resist. And this was the only method and the only system that could be placed in a region like the Azores, where we have, during the winter, very severe weather, and we could not risk it. So we also made a lab. We call it Lab Algae. A phycology lab means the reproduction of seaweeds. It was our intention, it is our intention to experiment on different species. We did that with around 27 different species now. We still are experimenting, and we think that this experience will lead us to the choice of the ideal species and the way we want to grow them. This is more or less a a view of our lab. We have cultural lab, we have development of all types of seaweeds. And here, down here, you can see a rope already inoculated with seaweed. These ropes go to the sea and then develop the lines.
Paul,
we have,
sorry,
to keep me
about a minute.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, so I have to speed it up. We had 4 different offshore structures in 3 different islands, and this was how it shows the ropes with the seaweeds that go into the sea. This would give us part of what I would like to bring you. The other part is really innovation, is something very different from this basic aquaculture. I bring you here 3 projects. The Met-Free project, which is now very in hand because everybody talks about methane problems. Methane is one of the most poisonous gases with greenhouse effect, and cows are responsible for about 25% of the production of methane. So we developed a way to being Azores a dairy productive area, it was vital to be able to deal with methane. So we developed a special diet based on one of the most common seaweeds, Asparagopsis, that you see here in the picture. And this diet fed to the cows in a very low quantity, 1 to 2% of the daily intake of cows. You could avoid about 98% of the methane. This is really important. It will probably develop to be a standard in the industry in the future because it will create sustainability in cow's feed. We have already a brand name to go to the market, and it's really a process that is about 2 years to be completed. A second project regarding innovation I bring you is we have enormous problems with iodine. Iodine in the world is a problem, not only in the Azores, but in Europe, in main Portugal, and in Europe too. About 70% of the population of the Azores has a severe lack of iodine. We used to have it in the salt. Every salt we use was iodized. Now we don't, and we eat by restriction of the diet is less and less salt. So salt is not a good carrier for iodine. So we thought where you have more iodine is in seaweeds. So let's profit the seaweeds. But it's not usual for us to eat seaweeds. We don't eat seaweeds, I mean, unless more Asiatic populations do. So we had to give it to a carrier that would bring the seaweeds to us. We did it with milk. We give seaweeds to cows that adapt perfectly to the seaweed intake. And for instance, this was an experiment initial with ulva, and seaweeds will pass the iodine to us through the milk in a very stable and very easy way. Also, another experiment was with eggs. We can do exactly the same with feeding the chicks with seaweeds and having this seaweed iodine, which is an original and organic iodine, pass through the eggs to us. This is something I was telling you about.
Close, please, Paul.
Yeah,
sorry.
I will close now. This is a major problem in the Azores and also on mainland, which is the Portuguese men of war. Portuguese men of war are invading everyone and every coastline, and we are also dealing with it in that perspective of new aquaculture and new uses for biotechnologies. We are extracting from the tentacles a neurotoxin that will give buttocks, and from the main part of the body, collagen. This is how we plan to deal with aquaculture in the future. We have to develop new ideas, new projects, new products, and first of all, be absolutely open about how to use it in the future. I'll have just a short video, 1 minute. Just to give you a little...
You're not making much of it easy, Paul.
No, I'm not. But I was not supposed to. Okay, it doesn't go. Okay.
That was very quick. That was a very short video. Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation, Paul. Indeed, it's an issue that we'll definitely discuss in other opportunities. These examples are very interesting. I would like to give the floor to Helena Abreu from Project Alga Plus, who is joining us online. Helena, can you hear us?
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
And see me too, hopefully.
Now we can see you. Yeah.
Good.
Welcome.
Perfect. Thank you so much, and I'm so sorry not to be there. I'll try to
start with your presentation, which is called
yeah,
Alga.
I don't have a presentation. Sorry?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. I'm saying I don't have a PowerPoint, so I'll just talk. Okay, I'll just speak. Yeah, cool. So it's so the first thing I have to say, thanks for the invitations and for the invitation to be here. Regarding the title, I like to say that challenges bring opportunities, yes, that create value, but at the end we generate even more challenges. So if that doesn't happen, something is wrong, and it becomes boring when you have the company. So just as introduction. Alga Plus, we are a seaweed farming, pre-processing and trading company, but also strongly involved in R&D for seaweed-based product development, and we started in 2012. I like to say that we are a primary producer, but also a blue biotech company. We originated in an R&D environment due to market opportunity and available knowledge at the time. And the opportunity at the time that we saw is that over 35 million tons of seaweed are really produced globally, and the largest share is still for food. 40% is still for food, the blue foods that we now like to call. And in Europe at the time, already over 10 years ago, and still today, there is an opportunity that we try to grab. So Alga Plus was created to bring a solution to the European food and cosmetic companies that 10 years ago were already looking for seaweed sourced in Europe, consistent in quantity and quality, and also with a neutral ecological footprint. So basically they wanted to be marketable as sustainable, and they still do. And the only way of doing this is through aquaculture. So at Alga Plus, we saw this, we took it as an opportunity, and we start farming and processing for seaweed species that today are sold across the European market, over 75% of our business volume. In our company, and I believe in most seaweed farming companies, we can apply several R's to our operation, and I hope you bear with me. So rethink production concept. So we try to move from monoaquaculture to an IMTA approach and with organic certification. The second R is recycle fish nutrients and valorize them into clean organic fertilizers, and reuse underutilized coastal infrastructures. In our case, in the case of Alga Plus, old salt aquaculture ponds that we transformed them into organic certified seaweed and fish production units. And then finally, reduce that residues throughout the whole process. So the zero waste approach, it's possible in seaweed farming and processing, and also in packaging, especially nowadays with even seaweed-based biomaterials in the production, but also the packaging. We came across several challenges that today, luckily, are more smooth, but still exist. And in looking back now, some of them became opportunities to be disruptive, pioneers in the good and the bad ways, and also to collaborate in starting to shape the seaweed sector in Europe. So the main challenges, I think, and I see is mentalities. And we saw this problem in mentalities, both from peers in our research at the time, 10 years ago, No one was really believing that it was a business to farm seaweed in Europe, and this is only 10 years ago, so the mentalities changed fast. Even in customers, so even the customers that were asking for the biomass farmed had doubts that this was possible to deliver in Europe. And then, of course, consumers and even relevant stakeholders. And relevant stakeholders, I talk about the legislators mainly, and also funds. And this, luckily, has also started to change. And nowadays, it's almost not a problem anymore. And then research was a bottleneck. And I think it still is, and we always need more research at the pace and with the focus that business demands. And in Europe, the main issue for research for seaweed farmers and processors has been and still is to reduce, so another R, operational costs. Overcome was good, so in 10 years, our company passed from 3 to 20, nearly 22 people at the end of this year, and with 100% fold increase in our business volume by the end of this year, also expecting. So in 10 years, I think it was good challenges. I mean, we had a lot of challenges, but the opportunities were also good and overcome. So as I was saying, mentalities have changed, and then luckily funds are here more than ever, I would say. And just to give you an example, just a few days ago, a company in the US received $7 million from Danone, a company that still is not farming anything, but they already have the funds. This was not happening 10 years ago. So things have changed really fast, and we can see this in the Ocean Conference during this week. Seaweed is really the raw material of the moment. Food is still the main driver, and as Paulo was saying that, but being in the market, food is still the main driver, not only as an ingredient, so the food, the seaweed itself, seaweed biomass, but also as a sea vegetable or as an extract. But also more and more as nutraceuticals. And Paulo talked about iodine, and we saw the example of an opportunity that bursted with the menace of a nuclear war not long ago, that iodine supplements were gone in all the supermarket stores of Europe, etc. This opportunity of seaweed as food was already visible in the farm to fork strategy, and more recently, as we heard already today, in the EU for algae platforms and in the Safe Seaweed Coalition by Lloyd's Foundation, that I also invite you to participate by tomorrow, on the 29th, at Forum Pico as another side event of the conference. Again, as I call it, indirect food for humans. Seaweed is being used as a feed to feed animals as a food. I mean, but also for health questions, and also, as we heard, to reduce nutrients into the environment, as in the case of the cow burps, as I like to call it, and also in plant production. And seaweed, large volumes of seaweeds are required for biostimulants, so sustainable biostimulants to continue to foster plant production in the planet. And then the newest ones, I would say, it's biomaterials, alternatives to plastics, and I'm sure Bert will give a nice talk on that, and as an alternative to a common and needed biomaterial to use in seaweed farming, but also, hopefully more and more valuable and valorize the ecosystem services. Nitrogen removal, very important, coastal protection and biodiversity restoration, and of course, decarbonization, carbon sequestration, although this last one is still a subject of high discussions among the academic bodies and entities. The sector creates a lot of jobs, so it's an opportunity for the problem of unemployment, although we don't see it this now in Portugal. And some numbers, the World Bank estimates that there's one job per 10 dry tons of seaweed. But if we look here in the case of Alga Plus, that operates in a land-based farming system here at the Ria de Aveiro Lagoon, we have one job per 2 dry tons. Of course, this needs to be optimized, but when we talk seaweed and when we talk algae, it's not all the same. They have different production systems, and they create different opportunities, not only in terms of job creation, but also in terms of the applications. So when we talk about all these successes and opportunities arriving, as I mentioned in the beginning, there are new challenges. And one of the main challenges I see is increasing cooperation in the full value chain. in order to reduce repetitions and errors of the past, and to faster increase the needs that we have in the sector of delivering results. And this increased cooperation is reached through some of the associations I was mentioning before, and I like to give also a special mention to a recent association created in Portugal with the Portuguese Association for Algae Producers, but also the large impact of the CEN group, the Comité Européen de Normalisation, that has been operating from Brussels, but also with technical teams all over Europe, also here in Portugal, that is delivering a massive work related to the standards that are really needed in order to bring this sector forward. Again, another challenge is I see, and I'm just finishing, I have 2 points and then I'm done. I think it's really important to avoid false marketing, as I like to say. We need to provide reliable data and reliable business into the market in Europe. Otherwise, we may risk to discredit in the years to come. And of course, we need to increase business seriously, real business, real numbers coming into the market in order to really move from the challenge to the opportunity, and then to a real business case. And again, the main challenge is always comes as mentalities. This takes time. So I see that this is an ongoing job, but I really like to see that here in Portugal, but also in Belgium and other countries across Europe, 10 years is nothing, and the mentalities regarding seaweed have been changing very fast into a pace that I think that no one was expecting, and that we see real results nowadays already in the sector. Thank you so much.
Elena, I don't think you can...
I'm not listening. I don't know.
Exactly. Thank you, Elena, for many interesting insights. I would now give the floor to Bert Grondendal from CUN. Application of biodegradable...
I don't know if it's just me, but I'm not listening to anything.
Beth, can you hear us?
Some technical issue. I'll go off and then come back again. Thanks.
Thank you, Elena.
I hope I was not too much time.
Very useful.
Just make gestures.
In the meantime, Bert, can you hear us? We can't hear you. So this must have been very frustrating for Elena, because she was basically talking to a responseless screen. Yeah, Bert, can you hear us? Yes?
Can you hear me?
Great. We can hear you and see you, so please go ahead with your presentation. Thank you very much.
I suppose you can see my screen. Thank you very much for the invitation to talk to you here today. As Mark Huygens from DEME already mentioned earlier during this event, and there is a need for sustainable building materials, or sustainable materials in general. That's what we have been working on in this Ghostbuster project over the past few years. Just to inform you about my company, CUN Industries. We're a technical textile company, already 60 years of age, and yeah, we're world leader in
do you have a presentation? Sorry to interrupt you. Do you have a presentation? Because we can't see it at the moment if you have one.
Okay, let me go back.
Maybe reshare, stop sharing and sharing again.
Yeah, I will do it again, no problem.
There we go, now I can see it.
Yeah, you can see it. Okay,
just maximize your presentation.
It is here. So we're a technical textile company located in Belgium, and for the past few years we have been active in this Ghostbusters project, developing the future materials, the more sustainable materials. We're world leader in coated textiles and also European market leader in apparel. Just to give you an idea about the products that we produce, if you look at the left top, trailers, 60% of all the trailers in Europe, and there are many, many hundreds of thousands of trailers in Europe, and they have a textile from CUN. But we're also active in a lot of other markets. Coated, when it's about coated textiles, we are the #1 in the world. I'd like to talk to you about the development that we did over the past years in marine biodegradable textiles. But before doing that, I first have to give you a little bit of information about what biotextiles actually are. You often hear the word bio-based plastics. Bio-based plastic means the word bio refers to the origin of life, or where did the carbon come from. When we talk about biodegradable plastics, we're talking about the end of life. And so there's a distinct difference between those. Bio-based textiles are textiles made of directly or indirectly from natural materials. But in most cases, we only talk about the indirect. For example, sugarcane is being converted into lactic acid, from which we can then make polylactic acids. When we're talking about biodegradable textiles, we are talking about materials that can degrade under certain conditions. That can be in marine environment, it can be in soil, etc. Let me just if you look at this figure on the right part, you see materials that are made of crude oil and others that are made of renewable sources. You also see biodegradable and non-biodegradable materials. And this is very important. And it's very important also to mention here, mentioned on the bottom, that bio-based textiles are not always biodegradable. Even if it's based on a bio-based source, it doesn't mean that it's biodegradable. For example, if you look at the corner here, bio-PET, it's made of biomass, but it's not biodegradable. It has the same properties as synthetic PET. On the other hand, there are also biodegradable textiles like polycaprolactone and PBAT that are biodegradable, although they are based on crude oil. So be careful when talking about bio-based and biodegradable materials. The most well-known bioplastic is polylactic acid, as you probably know. Prices are in the order of about €4 per kilo today, even higher as due to the price increases of the past years. But it's by far the best known biopolymer. But if you compare the volume of PLA production, about 240,000 tons, if you compare that with polyester, which is 80 million tons, then it's not even 1%, not even 1/4% of polyester production. And just to give you an idea of the volumes that we are talking about. Very important also to know is the mechanism of biodegradation. If you have a polymer, you need microorganisms to degrade the polymer. And what happens is that the microorganism excretes enzymes which attach to the surface of the polymer and then start a biodegradation process. In fact, it starts to cut the parts of the polymer in smaller parts, and in a certain moment they become water soluble and can be eaten by the microorganism. And in this way, CO2 in case of aerobic conditions, or methane gas in case of anaerobic conditions is going into the environment. So very important, you need microorganisms to biodegrade a material. So what we have been looking to is into developing marine biodegradable textiles. The application is quite simple, and we don't want to add any more micro and macro plastics to the environment, to the sea, to our oceans. So we want to come up with a material where we can guarantee our customers that if it gets into the environment by means of abrasion or by means of a storm, that it will degrade in time. That was the challenge. There are very few bioplastics available to make such biotextiles. We already mentioned PLA, and there are a few more, but there's a limited number. Fortunately, we can blend such materials, and in this way, start looking more deeply into developing these biotextiles. You should also keep in mind that the price of such products is quite high, where a polyester is maybe €1.5 to €2 per kilo, and we're talking about biopolymers which range from 4 till 20 euros per kilo, sometimes even more. Also, there's very little literature known about biodegradation of textiles, and especially of high tenacity textiles, technical textiles that we are working with. So we did not have a lot of starting point, and that's why we started looking into simple bioplastic plates on 1 millimeter thickness that we started investigating. And here you see an experiment that we started with in 2020. We had PLA and PCL and PHA as materials, and we simply put them in seawater for a year and followed up the weight reduction in time. And here you can see it. After 3 months, we already saw that the PCL had a 3.5% weight reduction, and after 9 months in total, it was already 10. And also the PHA, although slower, also degraded in time. And there was clear weight loss in time, indicating that the material is biodegrading under marine conditions under the influence of microorganisms. We also did similar
Can I
testing.
ask you to speed up a bit? You have about 2 minutes.
I will do so. Give me 2 minutes, please. We also did tests in a homarium, you know, for lobsters. We use this as an experiment test setup, where we had a constant temperature of about 22 degrees and constant fresh seawater. Here we also observed that PLA does not degrade in seawater. Lots of people think that it does, but it's not the case. It only is industrially biodegradable. But also here we saw that the PCl biodegrades very nicely, and also the PHA. But also we put some blends in this homarium and also saw there that certain blend materials were able to degrade in time. Then the last step was to convert these biomaterials into biotextiles. And so we were able to look into about 25 different blends and homopolymer configurations, and we were able to convert them into multifilament yarns. And on the left side, you see them as virgin materials, and on the right side, you see certain of these textiles and multifilament textiles that are starting to fractionate, and which is typically the first step in a biodegradation reaction. So this is my last slide. What have we been learning since then? Well, we have tested lots of different homopolymers and polymer blends and converted them into these multifilament yarns. Several of them showed signs of biodegradation, marine biodegradation, because we saw that there was a decrease in tensile strength, but also fragmentation taking place. We selected one material and converted that into a rope, as you can see on the photo here. And this rope is currently being tested in the Coastbusters project as a mussel dropper. And so mussel seed will hopefully attach to it and mussels will grow on it. Of course, we're also now doing mechanical tests on this rope and also on the yarns. And we're looking into the marine biodegrading properties under official test conditions. So that's, in short, what we have been doing over the past year. I would like to thank also our sponsors here on behalf of all the project partners. And I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. And so without further ado, I would give the floor to our final speaker, Miguel Pardo from Medina Engineering, with a presentation called Oligocate Worms, a novel approach in the context of dredging and hydraulic engineering. Trajectory towards the full-scale applications. Quite a tongue twister, but super curious to hear what you have to say. Miguel, the floor is yours. We can't hear you, Miguel. Can you try to reconnect your microphone? We can't hear you. Maybe. So the sign of mute is not on, so it might be your microphone.
Now.
Oh, can you hear again? Yes, now I can hear you.
How about this?
Fine. If you can reshare your presentation, I think we can hear you.
Okay, there you go. So now you do hear me and see my presentation, correct?
You have to reshare your presentation.
Like this?
Yes, just your presentation in full screen. Perfect, thank you. Please go ahead.
Okay, thanks a lot. Sorry for the small delay. I will count the time though, so I will not further exceed in time. I am indeed Miguel de Lucas. I am a researcher at Beltares and co-founder at Medina Engineering. And today I will talk about oligochaete worms, in particular about how to use these very small animals of only 2 to 3 millimeters to treat extensions that are characteristic of the hundreds of meters that are associated with dredging engineering and dredging activities. So let's first set the context. Every year, we dredged 200 million cubic meters of sediment in Europe. And typically, but not always, we store it in ponds like this one, of again several hundred meters. What we want, where we want to get is somewhere here. We want to transform sediments into proper soil that does not occupy space but simply contributes to the land. But that takes time. It is months to sometimes even years. So any sustainable solution in the direction of gaining time when transforming dredged sediment into soil would of course be of relevance. Let's come back to the figure of 200 million cubic meters. Lisbon is 100 square kilometers. So the total amount of dredged sediment would occupy the entire city of Lisbon with a height of 2 meters. And that is only every year. So in 5 years, we will have 10 meters on top of the entire city of Lisbon. If we look at the problem in a 1D way, every year, by building a column of 1 square meter section, we will reach half of the distance to the moon. So that is how big our problem is. So let's first see why are we on this business, what do we want to contribute, and what we want to achieve is to incorporate natural processes into the engineering toolbox. And we want to do that because of a number of reasons. First of all, because these processes are passive, so they have a very low relative carbon footprint. Also because technically they're competitive. We have demonstrated that at the lab and at the intermediate scale. And I personally hypothesize that they will be superior once mastered. And finally, because we come from a tradition of math engineers, Belgium has 2 of the largest dredging companies in the world. But now, over the last decades and years, we've been more and more collaborating and working together with biologists and ecologists. So it is just the right time. So this is a video I took somewhere in 2009, and what we are seeing is a bed of fine sediments, and we see that the worms are going up and down, creating tunnels. Back then, once we observed this, we hypothesized that these tunnels that the worms were creating were going to modify the hydraulic conductivity of the sediment. In other words, to make the watering to obtain soil from that sediment a lot faster. Oh, in fact, I could have talked about the lab results for hours. Many of the people sitting in the audience know that that is a fact. But I have summarized all of our work over 10 years in just this slide. In fact, in this video, in the left and the right-hand side, we have columns where worms were incorporated, and in the middle hand, we have our control. This is typical fine dredged sediment from the Benelux area, and this is what happens. The 2 columns with worms, in only 5 to 10 hours, the water up to 30% of the total volume. That 30% was not reached within self-weight consolidation for this type of sediment. And in general, and beyond this slide, we have characterized and quantified this increase in the watering speed to vary somewhere between a factor 20 and a very spectacular factor 600. So it works. But there are a lot of other things, and this is how the sample looks like after treatment. As we can see, it's highly tunnelized, and it has been oxygenated and dried substantially. So it is closer to what we will call a soil. So it works in the lab, but that doesn't mean that it works everywhere. So over the last 4 years, we've been testing upscaling factors. We tested things like the influence of weather, if there is room for cost optimization by trying different concentrations like this one, and we've checked the interaction with vegetation, which is common practice in restoration projects. And finally, we are currently reaching a volume of 40 cubic meters, which is the largest we have tested at an intermediate scale. But eventually, a lot of world stakeholders contacted us interested in this technology, but there were quite some things that the market itself could not deliver. Like, for example, we know that the technology works, but we might need several hundreds of kilos of worms to treat a 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer area. Well, nobody in Europe that we managed to found over the last 2 years will sell you this amount of worms. So what we have done is to create a company, it's called Medina Engineering, that will enable the implementation of natural solutions for muddy systems. By, for example, what we are researching right now, developing a scalable and movable farming operation that we can bring to everywhere where the watering by this technology, by worms, is needed. And that is only just one of the technologies and one of the services that we are planning to give in Medina. And at the moment, we're looking for our very first implementation test. And I believe I've made it nicely on time. And now it will be time for questions, but I think there are no questions too. So I leave you with my goodbye video on the effect of worms.
Thanks
a lot.
Thank you very much, Miguel. You were an excellent timekeeper, and unfortunately, I think we don't have time for any questions. But of course, people will be able to look at your contacts and continue conversations later on. So, thank you very much. This was a very rushed through session, but thank you for to all the speakers to helping me out in this role of timekeeping. And indeed, very interesting solutions. A lot of focus on climate mitigation, climate change mitigation. A lot of focus on circularity and rethinking a bit the ways we do things. And overall, just being able to develop our enterprises within what nature allows us to. So I'm very happy to have been in this panel, and I would pass the floor to Federico, who is going to close the session, and Pierre, right? So thank you very much.
So we are at the end of the fourth route for the blue economy. First of all, I want to thank all speakers and chairmen to contribute to our event. And I also want to pass a few takeaway messages that are personal. That's how I saw the event. A first takeaway for me is that I heard a lot a request for a paradigm shift. The word paradigm shift was used a few times. A paradigm shift to also give nature a place in the solutions that we are building. A second takeaway from my side was also a starting point of having a more holistic and a systemic thinking on what we are doing and where we are acting in. Of course, also a number of challenges. One of the big challenges I took away or take away is it's a challenge that we need new contracts, new types of execution of works, and also new ways of making inclusion of nature as a valuable element in our economic activity, let's say. To do that, we heard today that definitely we need pilot projects. They're a driver for the acceptance of the new solutions that we are thinking of. We need to overcome resistance to those solutions, and we can do that on small-scale pilot projects. And in that sense, both the Belgian coast and the Portuguese coast, they offer us opportunities to do that pilot cases. They're quite or very different, but in being different, it's just an opportunity to scale technology and to test technology in different conditions. That were my takeaways.
Okay, so I said almost everything, just a few remarks, final remarks from my side. The first thing is that the Chamber of Commerce of Belgium and Portugal is really democratic, so the president opens and the vice presidents of this area are closing. And here we have some very interesting cases of small enterprises and big enterprises talking together
with the big ideas, small ideas, philosophical approaches, very practical approaches, so highly contrasted with strategies, ideas, really real pilots, and ideas for the future. And that's the thing that the Chamber of Commerce wants to do and promote. It's to have challenges that will be fulfilled for the future, and as the Chamber of Commerce of Belgium and Portugal, challenges that will be solved together by both countries, with profit for both countries and with opportunities to safeguard the environment for both countries. And with that, we close the fourth routes of the Belgian-Portuguese route for the blue economy, and we hope, or at least I hope forward, for the fifth ones with all of you together with us sailing. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.